No,
step forward for me.
Oh, yeah.
Since I usually only drive for short distances, but that's huge.
All right.
I used to.
Oh, Paula. Nice to meet you.
So, I wish there were fresh home.
Hi, I'm Brian.
Hi. Pleasure. Paula Cope. Olivia, nice to meet you.
Jim, we met, so yeah, good to see you again.
I'll be here for the rest.
Thanks.
Oh, great.
I don't know what I set up the conference lines. So.
Did you? How's your mom?
Doing well at PT and
Welcome to the Conference Nation conferencing service. Please enter your PIN number to join your conference.
so it's
Okay.
looking up.
Yeah, good, good.
96.
Please hold while we place you into your conference.
Yeah, she got hit with a melanoma virus. Just, she was in the hospital for 10 days. How old? 96.
Oh. You don't want some of that all over.
Yeah, well, and you know, she spent 10 days in the hospital to get PT.
Yeah.
In order to be able to regain, you know.
At any age.
Yeah. So.
All right. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. I think given the lovely turnout, we should do a round of introductions. Maybe I'll start with you, Senator Campion.
Brian Campion, Bennington County and Wilmington.
Dick McCormick, the Windsor County Senate District.
Aaron Adler, Council.
David Dean, representative from Wyndham 4, Westminster, Putney, and Dummerston.
Amy Sheldon representing Millbury.
Chris Pearson, State Senator from Chittenden.
Mike Farrant, Committee Assistant.
Keeps us together.
Paul Dickin with Cope and Associates.
Olivia Mechanic with Cope and Associates. Paula Cope of Cope and Associates.
Billy Coster, Agency of Natural Resources.
Yellow Area Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
Diane Snelling, Chair, Natural Resources Board.
Donna Barlow, PC, Natural Resources Board.
John Brabant, Vermonters for a Clean Environment.
Bruce Post, semi-informed citizen.
Alexandra Coster, Natural Resources Board.
All right, great. Thank you all for coming. Today's agenda is focused on the public forums, which are are going to start June 27th. In Springfield.
You almost blew it.
And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Cope and Associates to run us through the draft of what they're planning. And
Great. So my first deliverable was to bring 12.
Good job.
Nice to check a box before we get going with anything else. We have an agenda in paper copy that I'd love to hand out as possible.
We have love for show and tell.
great.
So this is just a draft agenda, and it's what we're going to walk you through this morning. We're actually going to have you try some of the activities that we're planning to do at the public forum, so you can see and feel what the citizens will be doing and how they'll be participating. We brought the draft PowerPoint, the draft the field cards, because it's much more important that you have more than a window into just the materials, but actually experience it. Paul, did you want to talk any more about the what's gone on prior to this?
Sure. So we're getting to a place where I think we're looking for your feedback on detail and the actual content. So we've provided a deck which we talked about before as a discussion vehicle. And we have a run-through of show in terms of a slideshow, and the agenda hints at where we might draw on Diane and her group as well. We've gone back and forth a little bit, chatting with your group and trying to understand what we're missing, which has been really helpful, and get the history has been super helpful. And then trying to balance out where does it fit to have us as sort of a third party to take all that information and present, and where more sense, perhaps, to invite Diane to speak or Don in that section of the public forums. Does that make sense? So we've worked this a number of different ways. We've gone to a place where we were looking at very broad topics like scenic view as a topic, thinking about the spirit of Act 250 and then trying to get people in that visioning place going forward, reground where it started, and then look forward for the next 50 years. Then we came down a little lower and started playing with the detail and thinking how much detail do we want to get into, anticipating a pretty broad audience. And we've settled somewhere between the two, if that's fair to say. So this is our first chance to get your feedback really on the altitude that we're pitching this about what we think is appropriate. So this is all about feedback from our point of view. No ego involved. As long as you're kind with your words, take your advice to heart. So, walking through the agenda for a public forum that you have in front of you. There are 2 hours, so kicking off at 6. There's a welcome and an introduction, which we're thinking is going to be the or the local representative of the commission. Still hold. You set them up in your districts. Okay, good. Then there's a welcome and a sort of brief overview. And that's where we are suggesting Diane and her group may want to pitch in and be more concise and more grounded in this than be that third party for discussion, certainly. Third element is Act 250 essentials. So really walking through then the background and the history, the key facts, and the process overview that we're going through with your commission. Why it's important, what we're charged with, where the results will go, and why this input is important. Then an explanation of the big deal, which is this card game that we run. And we have sample cards for you to play with and respond to. And then we open it up for a little bit broader community discussion in priority setting. That is not an open mic, which I know is something we're trying to sort of manage how this exchange takes place. That is whomever leads it, whether it's Paul or myself, bringing back the results from the table discussions and channeling any questions that get brought from those tables. So they're all funneled through a facilitator. And making sense? The use thing. And then we wrap up again by the local representative of the commission, thanking everybody, talking about next steps, where this information is going, and then closing this out. Yeah.
Is the community discussions and priority settings, is that also when we break out, just physically, like across the room to smaller group discussions?
Yes. So that's where perhaps 8 at a table, ideally something like that. And so each table has a facilitator and hopefully a note taker. So the facilitator walks us through what these cards are about, how to use them, brings the conversation back in a good-sized group. We can manage a conversation with 8 people. We're grouping up to the full group and gets a little more awkward. So the conversation stays local, facilitator, we train those folks to bring it back and stay on point, move the dialogue along, and then a note taker is taking down what is really the heart of your public forum, which is that rich dialogue that happens around this topic. It's unscripted, people say that they bring their interest to the conversation, to the topic, and that's where we get really the rich data. And then we force a choice at the end. There's another layer of data, and I think we've talked about this before. So that you have to, well, we understand we're balancing all these interests in the spirit of what Vermont can look like. We force a choice, and in that we find people give you another layer of thinking. So if I have to prioritize my scenic view of Vermont over my need for economic development, I'll talk about why I place them. Even though it's, I don't think you have to do that. It's a way of sort of channeling another level of conversation.
Can I just ask a question? You said hopefully a note taker, but then that's critical. So where will the note takers come from?
Did I say hope?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully the
forum's
forum's
on the 27th, and hopefully we have note takers.
Yeah. So that's something we'll get into.
Yeah, we need to talk about volunteers and staffing and all of that. And we talk about, I want to walk you through the forum first so you sort of get an idea of how many people we're thinking we need at each place. And then note taker is one of the jobs.
Great. Yeah.
Well, members of the public who come to this, will they know before they get there that there's going to be breakout groups?
sense is that some people are gonna come because they wanna speak. They're gonna think that there is an open mic, and they're gonna feel silenced if it's not there. There are others probably coming for information. They want us to explain to them what we're doing. And I think it's important, if we're gonna take this approach, that it not be a surprise, that people know what they're getting into.
I think we could do that through a press release that introduces it locally before each forum. But with the design that we have, it's very unusual that people feel they weren't heard at the end. So when I walk you through that, we'll see what your reaction is to that.
Typically, we'll have a mock-up and a message sent out to the public that they can sign up for a ticket of sorts. It's free to attend these events, but then through there will be a description of the event as well, so we could add in what's discussing.
So we could go to the design part, or do you have more?
This part?
Sure.
Yeah.
So let me, can I?
Okay.
Okay. So I want to talk broadly first about some of the premises of public meetings, because most of us in Vermont are used to open mic town hall style, and this is not that, so it's different. So there are a few things that we use as a framework for our public meetings. One is that the intent of a public meeting is to have civil discourse, and civil is the operative word. So that happens with respect both from the speaker and from the audience, and that the tone of the overall meeting is really built on a foundation of respect for the topic, for the presenters, and for the citizens. The second is that it's focused. So this is an Act 250 discussion, and that doesn't open it up to everything else that you might want to bring in. Sometimes we use actual ground rules, and one of the ground rules we use, if we use them, is one carry-on bag at a time. You can only bring one piece of history in with you, and once you say it, you're done. You can't bring in, you know, your wheelbarrow full of everything you always wanted to say at a public meeting.
They will.
The third is that we keep it focused, so we keep reminding them why we're here and what the goal is of the meeting, and what the outcome is that we desire, and what the information is that you need from their contributions. Another is that all voices matter. So we put that right up front in the introduction, and that we explain that they will have ample opportunity, that the expectation is everyone gets to talk, not just some people get to talk. And then the last piece is control. So usually the people who are holding the meeting, their greatest fear is that it will get out of control. And citizens also generally don't like that. That doesn't make them feel comfortable. It doesn't make them feel comfortable when somebody dominates a conversation or they can't get their words out. And also we have the whole respect for introvert, extrovert. So we don't want just the squeaky wheels to be heard, but we also understand that you can have very positive voices who are just stylistically more apt to contribute than the quieter citizens. So we use facilitators to facilitate the discussion in the small groups. We don't let it just go free for all. Things are timed, and we do a training before each forum on site with the people that are facilitating locally and with all of you. So we literally walk through it, and we teach them how to use the cards and exactly what's going to happen. So before a facilitator sits down with the citizens, they know exactly what their role is, what's going to happen, and then I'll be circulating, going table to table. And that has worked very well. So I've personally done probably over 120 forums with this design and many other designs, so I feel like I have a good handle for how it could go, and I'm really very confident about it. In terms of setting up the material, there's 3 rules that we use, and it's a formula called KFD, no feel do. So the first thing is, what do we want them to know? And that's the current law and the process, and also the goal of the commission. Those are really the key points. There may be other things that you want them to know, but that's sort of the highlights. The second is, how do we want them to feel? We want them to feel confident when they leave, that they're well informed, that they know how to contribute after the forum, that they were heard during the evening, that the commission is handling this in a responsible way. They're very confident about that, and they also feel that everything was given to them in a very open and honest way. And the last one is the do. What do we want them to do? We We want them to stay involved, so we'll be mentioning the survey and other on-ramps that the citizens have in order to keep contributing their information, articles that might come out in the future, so they'll keep an eye on that, and other ways that groups can continue in the process beyond the forum. So that's sort of the premise to how we design a community forum. So now what I'd love to do is see first if you have a quick question, but then I'd like to walk you through the material.
Any questions? Any questions from advisors? I'm not sure we actually made clear, you might know, but a lot of these folks are on the advisory group.
I keep thinking he has his hand up.
Yeah, you know, it takes a long,
I know.
it takes a long time not to be distracted by Ethan. It's taken me 3 years.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you inspire people to remain active after the forum's over?
Well, part of it is through their community, so keep the discussion going. If they're attached to social media, to try to get them to be connected, because messages will keep going out. Try to get them to go back and visit the website, telling them that new things will be posted. I'm assuming that things will be posted after each forum. It's really helpful if we can take pictures and post pictures so that they can see what attendance looks like around the state. How many people are participating is usually a motivator. I think it really matters what you all say in here. I'm assuming some of you have either newspaper columns or blogs or some way that you contribute regularly to the dialogue in your own communities, and keeping that up. Anything through partner organizations, newsletters, websites, anything like that.
It's a good question. Last time I was here, I think I was overzealous in my ambition. Keeping this alive, I was duly put in my place. I think there's a migration that has to happen. When this process ends, we migrate people who were interested and came out to a place where you continue to be active. It won't be this commission's process anymore. So it'll be sort of getting your information from a source like my fans group or other places locally. I think that's a piece of that transition plan at the end. And I think we talk about that in the outreach plan.
And I would just add, the charge for us is to come up with a report and draft legislation that then translates to House and Senate committees in January. So, that's therefore kind of a never-ending process. But people, it is valuable for citizens to take ownership of that all the way along.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing. Just that's the avenue for continued engagement. Absolutely.
To make the same point that Representative Shelley just made, that wouldn't be, Michael, if this wouldn't be a question, wouldn't that be the avenue?
Yeah.
Can we keep going?
Yes.
All right.
Which means that the address has to be posted visually at the meeting, so people can write it down. There's nothing less effective than announcing a website verbally. I'm just,
Put it on the
this
slide.
map poster idea. There's gotta be a big poster with, stay in touch. Here's the address. Write it down. Thank you.
Well, also, we can have takeaways, we can have cards that they take with them. We are also planning to have, we usually use a red box, literally a red box, and we ask people to drop their comments into the red box before they leave. And we just leave slips of paper there, and it's not uncommon for us to get a dozen. I mean, most people feel like they really had a chance to talk during the forum, but people will contribute things, and then when we get to the end, we'll tell you how we're gonna address questions, because I know that was one of the concerns.
Great.
Ready to keep going?
Past the first forum, we talked about this I think last time, but the first one we inform the survey, the formal survey. So post the first forum, we'll be able to have hard copies and maybe even electronic access to the survey. So people as they exit can actually participate in the survey as well as having something that they take away that has an address directly. So they have to memorize anything.
So let me introduce you to the big deal. So this is something I invented maybe 25 years ago, and Shelburne actually won an award years ago when we did the priorities of the natural resources in Shelburne. for the way that the cards were used with the citizens. It was really the first major public forum we did where we prioritized natural resources. But we've used this for housing and zoning and community and economic development, a million different uses. And we went to a card deck because every culture and every age group plays cards. So this is something everybody is familiar with managing, handling cards. They accommodate folks who are colorblind. So it says on it, it's the green card or the red card or the purple card, so you can read that. We've done them in large print. One side has a graphic and the other side has text. And we've divided the criteria right now, this is kind of where we started, into 4 packs. So we have one pack related to the criteria that are in the natural category, one related to growth, another water and air, and another economic. We just chose those yesterday to make a sample deck for you to see how it works. You can make whatever modifications to it you want today, but we took your literal criteria, we divided it up. So every single card, and Olivia is working on getting the photographs, every card has pictures and text. The way that it works is the facilitator would take the first deck. So let's say these are the green cards and these are all natural. And what we do is we've divided it so the citizens aren't dealing with 30 cards all at once. And we say we're going to set priorities right now and come to agreement on what your priorities are. So we would literally, as a facilitator, hold up the first card to the group and say, this first one is about historic sites. And we would read the text. Is the project affecting a historic site? If the project is affecting a historic site, is the effect harmful? If the effect is harmful, is it excessive or appropriate? That's historic sites. And so you read through the cards and then you lay them down. And so we have archaeology, wildlife habitats. The content is right off of your material. Endangered species, scenic natural beauty, aesthetics, and rare or irreplaceable natural areas. And they would all be laying down. And then the facilitator asks the people at the table group to prioritize them by putting the cards literally in order with your most important thing on top. And the most important thing to recognize is that these are a vehicle for dialogue. So what's happening is they're talking about it, and there's a note taker at the table who's jotting down the important things that they're chatting about. The end result is that you get consensus from a small group of people who have now all had a chance to talk about what their priorities are. And what we've heard in some other areas is, oh, I know this is important, but it's not important anymore. Like, let's say something was set up 30 years ago, and I think we had this, I want to say it was in Shelburne, but it might have not been in Shelburne, but where something, when it was put into place, was very, very important, and its importance had shifted. And so you get that through the conversation. So what we thought of asking you to do is first we're going to pass these around so you can feel them, see them, touch them. Not all of them are done, so just so you know that, we're missing some pictures, I think. And then give it a try, see, prioritize them, see how you come to consensus over one of these packs, and then give us feedback about it.
So priorities related to what? I mean, are these things all, if there's a project being built or a preservation, how do you choose historic sites over archaeology? What's the?
So it's going to depend mainly on what the project will be if someone was building.
Okay.
And as well as.
So people are going in, you're saying,
yes,
and
so
this is the
say
part that
they're-
I think maybe it wasn't said or maybe I missed it. A project's being built, and if a project were being built, what are the priorities that you would?
And that could be just one viewpoint, we could change that, but if it was a project and someone is going to get an Act 250 permit, these are the pieces they need to consider. And then they then list them, so archaeology may seem a little lower on their list, but historic sites may trump that.
Right.
From there, the group will decide, say historic sites is our top one, and we do the same for all 4 packs, and then we then relate them all to one another. So it's historic sites, water pollution, erosion and capacity, soil to hold water, and primary agricultural soils are our top 4. And then of those four, we decide the very most.
So every table has different cards.
Every table will have all four packs of
All
cards.
four, okay.
Yeah.
Senator McCormick.
Vermont has already decided that each one of these is a criterion in the law. So why would what do we gain by ranking them? And the fact is, you gotta do it all. Well, would we consider changing that? We're gonna drop some of these, or?
No. So the two biggest outcomes from the forums that we see are to actually wrestle with, we do have competing interests. Act 250 is all about balance. And the spirit of it 50 years ago is what we're trying to reinvigorate for the next 50 years. So we have people in the community actually wrestling with that balance. You get to touch it in a way that's very different than simply channeling, well, I believe that the environment is very important. You actually have to get in a conversation with people who think a little differently than that. And the sharing of perspectives means that your audience will walk away from the forum understanding more how challenging it is. Act 250 is a fabulous piece of spiritual legislation. How do you make that work in every moment? So the idea that we think that this brings home is that you do actually get to wrestle with it. And then the second piece is, given that the content is all about what Act 250 is about, we're going to get dialogue. So if I'm a developer and I'm at the table, I'm no doubt going to speak to why I think this is more important than this, so I get my point across.
I think the other big factor here is a lot of our citizens probably don't know these are all the criteria. So there's a huge educational.
These are all sub-criteria.
Right.
This is all criterion A.
Yes. So there's a big educational reason to make them understand the very parts of the act that you have to look at each and every time. It is possible that we could write scenarios before, so that, if such is happening, give us the priorities, and then different scenario, if this is happening, now reprioritize them. We didn't want to get that complicated right away, but what I'd really like to do is have you try this and see what you think, and then give us more feedback. Because you may feel these are too detailed, or you may feel it's not important, or you might experience and feel like it's very important. We don't know that, but this is where we started.
Aaron and then Diane.
Just wanted to note two legal concerns, not the process, but the specifics. First, Act 250 does not balance among these criteria today, so this exercise may be conveying something to the public that is not true today, and there may be an assumption that should be true in the future, but that is a question to actually, a question that could be asked. Should Act 250 balance among the criteria? Secondly, your charge includes considering whether to add, include issues that are not today in the criteria, such as climate change, and this won't get you feedback on that.
Yeah, I had that thought too.
Yeah, so if I just thank you for the more.
No, that's it.
Yeah, so the first deck we did was much higher level, and it was essentially talking about the spirit of Act 250. And so that was about balance, and it was more about the vision for the next 50 years. It wasn't the detail of the criteria. It was a deck that really talked about using languages.
Growth and opportunity.
Yeah.
Right, sediment patterns. There's also scenic areas, economic development, community engagement, as opposed to.
So in terms of the vision piece, that as a deck would get people talking about how you balance development with natural beauty, with wildlife, whatever, with wetlands. So that was a higher level, and it may well be that is more appropriate for that particular goal.
That's definitely our goal. I have the same thought, but I'm open to trying this, and Diane has a
I was
question.
basically going to say the same thing that Aaron pointed out, which is I think it might be confusing to ask people to prioritize among the criteria because they're all required. Now, there can be a decision, the commission can decide that's not what they want, but traditionally the issue of balance has been between smart growth, economic development, and how far we want to protect the environment. So it's a little more I mean, it's still a complicated decision, but it's not between habitat or archaeology.
Yes.
Did you bring the other deck?
We have every,
Oh,
The first draft?
No. So if you want to do it that way though, you could take one of each of these colored decks and take it as a big topic. So here's a card about growth, here's a card about water and air is a big topic. Does that make sense?
I also wanted your climate change point. They had talked about doing what we call a disruptor card, which is you have the group talk about it, and then you take a red card that might say climate change on it and say, okay, here's a disruptor, how does this change what you just talked about? So that's another way to get that.
I'm really trying to make sure that they get what they should do their report.
Yeah, I like disruptor.
I think our challenge is to get public input on values and help us translate that to details that crafts legislation or amends legislation. And so I must say, the first draft deck of a higher level vision that measures the values, I think, is more where I had conceived us going. And we've wrestled with this throughout. I mean, how do you have a productive meeting with a developer who's done 30 projects sitting next to somebody who's never been involved and cares about the landscape? That's a big challenge. But our goal is to have those people meaningfully talk about it and both feel like they're being heard and giving us something fruitful.
So I think that is possible, if I may just respond. So the idea of disruptors, there are two that made sense to it. One was climate change, in which case it's an invitation, it's not the same level of criteria. As we think about the subject of climate change, then we're not saying climate change does or does not exist. Whomever's there can weigh in. It makes me think of this, and so you're getting more data to that conversation. And the other disruptor that we were thinking of around transportation, that I don't think rises to a level of one of those big buckets, but is a consideration across all of them.
Senator McClellan.
Okay, first I want to apologize to you. I find it very frustrating when I'm trying to present a somewhat complex idea, and I've barely gotten started and someone's jumping in and objecting to something. Okay, I said, let me give you the whole idea first. But having said that, the idea of seeking balance between the sub-criteria is, I wonder if that is, I think that I fundamentally have a problem with that. And I just want to give a little bit of history. In the late 60s, the debate in Vermont was between people who looked at Vermont and said, it's just fine the way it is, and developers are ruining it, we're going to just stop it. And then there were others who were saying, we need, this is the 20th century, we need the prosperity, we need the jobs, we need the tax revenues, bring it on. Yeah. And that, the balance, if you will, the compromise was achieved right at the outset of Act 250, which was, no, we're not going to stop development. You can develop here, but you got to do it right. And this is part of the definition of doing it right. So I don't know if these are, wherever, maybe we can change our minds. I would probably resist that, but others might think we should change our minds. But the operating principle now is that these are to be honored. And all the criteria are, because that's how you define doing it right. So
it was never our intention to have them drop any. It was our thinking that, or at least my thinking that, in revitalizing the future legislation, that maybe you did need to know how the public felt about one thing, one kind of criteria over another. But that may not be your goal, and I may have misunderstood that. And so these are complete, that's why it's a mock-up,
Yeah.
right? We can go in a lot of different directions with this. But I didn't know if you would need that in terms of how the legislation is done.
I would have no trouble with, say, just using the same approach and just asking, rather than prioritize, ask, do you think these are still important? Do you think this should remain? What do you think should be added? What do you think should be missing? My brother Kurt and I have fought publicly about aesthetics. Where he says it's a trivial criterion and ought to be deleted. And I've always said it's important and ought to be preserved.
Do you have a
That's-
video of that we can play?
I got some editorials that said he was right.
Do you want us to add, well, we normally have blank cards, so people want to add things.
Yeah.
And we usually ask them if there's anything they don't think is important, and almost never does that happen. The idea wasn't that something would be dropped, it would just be that we would get input, but do you want us specifically to ask them about adding?
Well, you said this, you know, they're not all 50 years old, so some of these have been added over time. But at some time in the past, a decision was achieved through process that this mattered, this was important, and this concern ought to be addressed. And just, do you think we should renew that? Should we confirm that?
Okay, actually, I just want to say, we agreed as a group, actually, that, or at least many of the conversations I've been part of, like, statutorily, there's a deep commitment to the principles of Act 250. And this commission isn't opening the door on questioning that. It's saying, what's the future, and how do we improve it, based on agreement that the environment is really important to Vermonters, and so is a strong, vibrant economy. And how do we get to that balance point around those, and at the public forums, I've been imagining they're at very high level, so that people can really start to understand what they love about Vermont, and what does it look like in the future that we can maintain that part that we love and need for our health, the health of life in Vermont, all of us. And I think for me, getting people to understand ecosystem function and like where people fit in, and that's the information, the new information we have since Act 250 was passed, is we have a lot of conceptual understanding has improved, but also the facts have been improved. And so we have more information to help us move in that direction. It's not just about a beautiful landscape, it's about a functioning landscape. And humans are part of that functioning landscape. And so I think that's a really important, for me, a really important piece of the conversation. Diane.
I was just going to add, going back to what Senator Pearson said about values, I think there's also an opportunity to get past just straight up values, and I'm thinking of the many, sort of every 5 to 10 years somebody does a big collective thing about what do we want Vermont to be, and we want, dense population areas surround, separated by rural, that maybe we could further amplify that into, all right, and then what does that look like? What do those dense cities look like? I don't know if that's as far as, if that has any interest to you, but I think we know generally from many different studies and symposiums and outreach that people care about certain things that we're all aware of. And then the question is, how do we further refine that down to what could actually be a guide to how we develop?
One comment that I just thought of was, if we were to keep these same topics of sorts, but if you said growth and development, if we had multiple photos and imagery of a different type of development that they then, go upon and then decide and rank them, would that be something of interest? Similarly to landscape, if it would be rolling hills versus very developed area, tourism care, is that like a way of content?
Well, I guess I've been wondering if I'm not sure it would, because our choice isn't, do we develop shopping malls or housing or industrial sites. So it's that people want to build industrial sites, and so how do we react, right? So I guess I'm wondering, when we're at a little bit higher level, the ordering is very intriguing to me. guess I'm just trying to think of how that will look, because say we break it down by, broad topics, if people are interested in water and air, let's say, somewhere in there, the developer's gonna say, well, you gotta make money, the economy is paramount, and maybe that is it, maybe there are topics and every deck has an economic engine card, and part of our read is how high that ranks for people, I don't know, but it's just intriguing, they all kind of are gonna brush up against that, right?
Yes.
I mean, developers will tell you that we're out of our mind and we're foregoing a lot of economic development because we're fussing how our landscape looks, and Act 250 is sort of the symbol of that.
So that's the conversation that we were anticipating at the higher level again. And so there's bigger buckets, then we went down lower just to test, I think, where your appetite was for detail. We can do it at that high level, and I do think it makes sense. I do think those voices will come out, and the richness of that data is exactly what we're looking for. The idea of those two disruptors, can I probe you about that? Climate change, I think, weighs in as a filter, and I think transportation more broadly.
I'm glad we've come back to that, because it is in fact broader than transportation, it's infrastructure.
Right, thank you.
Because as you take a look at our wastewater treatment capacity and the millions and millions and millions of gallons of untreated sewage that are pouring into our waterways, there might be some choices that have to be made, or will be made, depending on where the society comes down over the next 10 years or so. Wastewater, water, electricity.
Yeah.
How do you do anything these days without electricity? But huge impact on the landscape, huge. So it's broader than transportation.
Yeah.
You and I had this
Yeah,
conversation.
No, it's
and
good,
then,
thank you.
Senator
There's
Campion.
also this idea of how fast your emergency services, how far you are from the school. That's sort of rolled in.
So I guess one of my questions goes a little bit back to what Senator McCormick, I think, was asking, or at least he prompted this thought. Are there any sacred cows that we should not even be putting on the table? And I mean, you look at these, I mean, if all of a sudden, and I guess that perhaps everything is open, I'm also just thinking about the process. Okay, we're sitting and we hear from everybody that wildlife habitats is the least interesting thing for them and the least priority. Everybody that wildlife habitats is the least interesting thing for them and the least priorities. How does that, are we making a commitment in some way that we're going to alter? I just, again, am trying to set good expectations for those people who are around the table and participating in these, as well as expectations for what kinds of decisions we're going to have to make. And again, are there things that we, I mean, I have my own questions going into this. It's not so much this. So I just maybe trying to look through.
So there are a couple of things.
Actually, the bigger cow question might be going to the chair and this group more, but I'd be curious.
Well, in our study, we're looking at the exemptions. So we know that farm runoff is significant, but it's exempt. And there's one other. So, in full disclosure, I've been sick and my toddler has been through 3 times this week. Hence my not plugging it. But yeah, is that on the table? I don't think that's a card at the same level of this. But we do think there's a second round of conversation that you want to know where people are with this idea of balancing our history of family farms and what that means in terms of environmental impact, and whereas Act 250 maybe look forward instead of backwards on that. And there's another piece that I would love to throw in, and that's around jurisdiction for Act 250.
And also the sacred cow piece. I mean, are there things that we aren't going to put out there that we believe that we're going to just preserve?
I think
Or is
that's
it-
for us to tell them.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think it strikes me that we're a panel of judges in that sense.
Yeah, right, so we're
Even
gonna
if the
hear
room
things.
is, really gung-ho about something, it's a good way to discover our history.
Yeah, and if I could say, I mean, I think we ought to be up front, right at the beginning, that we're sort of fact-finding, that everything that we hear, discuss, the results of whatever, will be filtered by a deliberative process called the legislature. All right, so that
It's a committee hearing.
we want to,
in some ways.
yeah, we want to hear you.
Right.
We want to hear you, but that becomes part of a deliberative process.
Yeah.
Please understand that.
Right, it's not a referential.
Right,
No,
right.
So, and I'm going to your wildlife habitat, the card
Yeah,
is up
just
on the
what's the
bottom.
expectation, yeah.
Well,
Doesn't mean it's
okay,
gone.
it
Right,
doesn't mean
right.
it's
You
gone.
didn't vote out wildlife.
Right.
Yeah.
Walmart wins.
Yeah.
See
Yes,
ya.
no, we are sensitive and aware of that. Thank you.
Representative LaFave actually has been waiting.
Thank you. In talking about balance, I think it's important to strike the difference between the local control and what's coming down from the state in terms of either legislation or now an Act 250 is in fact a fact of life in terms of what those decisions that regional commissions make. And I think, and one of the things that I hear a lot about Act 250 and its criticism is people are saying, what do you want Vermont to look like? And in a rural area where it's still a pretty much a wide canvas. The land is still there. You're very aware of the landscape. It hasn't been developed. And so the question then becomes more, more pressing in a way that you're just going to set up something that's going to more or less put into motion what it will look like in 20 years. And there's a lot of fear, I think, in terms of making Vermont look like what people have moved from. Especially since we're now getting more and more into tourism. You hear that more and more often in terms of, in terms of whether or not you can have a motorboat on a lake, or what are the hours that you should be able to participate. I'm not trying to maybe go far afield here, but it's like I think the rural area is kind of a tabula rasa in terms of it hasn't been really defined yet in terms. These questions are still kind of open in my neck of the woods especially. And I think when you're talking about striking a balance, I think there's, somehow what is being done has to be, what the image that we're trying to achieve in terms of how Vermont what our kids will see Vermont, has to have that kind of, the idea that it isn't lost. I think there's a great fear that the rural character of Vermont is going to be a loss. It's going to be sacrificed in a lot of this. And how does Act 250 kind of move in to kind of more or less reassure them that that's not going to happen, yet at the same point, give them a sense that it's going to be a place you can make a living. I think that's, for us, that's a very big deal.
So in this speed dating arena today, we didn't give you that full book. We are acutely aware that we're not asking people to prioritize and therefore dismiss them or diminish any of them. It really is about tell me how you would wrestle with these things, because that's the conversation that we want to have. There is a piece of the original legislation actually that I managed to ask you about that references there will be a creation of sort of a visionary plan, and that never happened. So is that part of what you are wanting to maybe?
I think we're looking at what that means, and I think Representative LaFave started to get to this around balancing state versus local resources, and that to me would be a really great conversation for the public forums. Like, what are the critical resources of statewide significance, and what are the resources that we can let locals have jurisdiction over, or should be letting them manage on their own? But there's a I don't like this word, but I'll use it because people probably understand it, but an infrastructure aspect to our natural resources that are critical to all of us. And we need to be able to, I think, identify those and communicate that to the state. And then it's sort of a nested system, the way I imagine it, that there's going to be regionally important resources. and then there will be locally important resources. And then the other thing I wanted to kind of follow up on with Representative LaFave's comments are, we are reimagining the rural economy right now in Vermont, and how can Act 250 help inform that and help guide that process? We have economic challenges, if not, I mean, the forestry industry is needing to be reimagined, the dairy industry is needing to be reimagined, but we also have an incredible infrastructure of state government and also nonprofits already working on all these things. And so how do we kind of get to this nugget of what does it look like? What does the vibrant rural economy look like in Vermont in the next 50 years?
So one of the comments I want to say as this progresses is when Olivia and I looked through all of the material and we looked at all of the possibilities that we could put forward in a community forum, we have to be very cognizant that the public can only handle so much, and we only have really about an hour of their time to chew on all of this. So we can't do everything. So when we leave here today, we need to know from you exactly what we're focusing on, because we need to redesign that hour of community discussion very precisely and very deliberately.
Totally agree.
The other thing, just to think about in terms of language, the educational language used for public forum materials is no higher than 10th grade. Everything that you see here before you is around 9th grade. And that's typical of every public forum. That's what you shoot for is 10th grade vocabulary. It's different as we travel around the state. We know that the level of conversation and discourse is different, and we have to respect those differences around the state. So we go for a uniform level. So we just have to, I'm hearing what you're saying, and you know, Paul and I looked, and Olivia and I looked at the exemptions and jurisdiction, all those things. A lot of that is just very complicated when you put a mixed group of citizens.
So we are not imagining that these conversations are getting into the detail, and I would suggest that the detail you've gone to is more than what I, at least, was ever imagining.
Yes.
And I wanted,
Yes.
I mean, we sent out a couple thoughts on what those 4 high-level topics might be, and I'd like to absolutely give you the deliverable of what are the conversations gonna be so that you can go make your, set it up. Diane.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject that listening to Representative Fave and your comments, Representative, Madam Chair, that we can't forget that many people equate planning and regulation. Act 250 is regulation, but there's still an element of planning that needs to be integrated. And a lot of the things that we're talking about, you know, respecting the rural areas, et cetera, are really as much about planning as they are regulating. So if you don't start out regulating to make something be there, you plan it and then you regulate to deliver the,
Senator Pearson's
Paula, to your question, I think we've wrestled with this is a very consistent theme of a highly complex law and talking to regular people about it and about their vision. One way I've wondered if we could sort of get the best of both worlds is to keep the forums pretty high level, visionary, values, whatever, but then we've talked a lot about this survey that maybe is an opportunity to get more into the details, and not everybody that takes it has to answer every question. Some people, you know, have experience, deep experience in this, and their feedback would be valuable. And so I don't know if that's helpful, but it's something that we have talked about, this sort of slightly bifurcated part of the process, which allows us to maybe collect sort of both layers of feedback.
I'm sorry, Senator, would you repeat again?
Well, so the public discussion is sort of maybe, I don't know if it's shallow, but it's higher level.
Yeah.
And then, but recognizing that people who come and people who maybe even don't come to forums but are watching this process do have important feedback to give us about procedural stuff, about sort of more of the details. And could that be in our survey design? We've talked about, you know, having people leave with a survey or having an online survey that is it seems to me to make sense. You know, have you ever been involved in an Act 250 project? Yes. Okay, well then we'd like you to answer these 10 questions.
Yeah.
You know, and because we don't have to give every person that interacts with us the exact
I
same
think that's a
experience
great
because
idea.
people come to it with such a different. So I don't know if that helps in the thinking, but it's been.
This idea of the plan, is it possible?
Yeah.
Is
So,
it possible within what your commission may be then trying to move forward?
well, what I am now kind of understanding is that we are seeking input from the public to understand what are the public trust resources. And people need to understand that there are a few definitions we want people to walk away from this conversation with, but most people don't understand that. Water, for example, is a public trust, and keeping it clean is our obligation. And so, and it goes. It's not, we're not choosing between development and agriculture and clean water. We're saying we're gonna have clean water, and how do we get there with a vibrant economy? And so we want people to understand that, and then I think, and it's a challenge that I put to you as our conduit for communication. I'm using terms that I'm familiar with, but you know, the idea of landscape function and what are the critical natural resources that Vermonters see are important to statewide health of our environment. And those are the things that potentially become part of a bigger vision or plan. And helping people understand the importance of that. And most people understand that it's all integrated in, you know, the basic science stuff.
With the passage of Act 250, you're right, that there was supposed to be a state plan. That was rejected by the public. It just didn't, it was top down, it was, I mean, some people saw it as communism. In the 80s, the Cunin administration passed Act 200, which did away with the idea of the top-down state thing. It was that the state would promote and support local planning and would require that local plans be coordinated with neighboring plans. And that was pretty much rejected by the public. It was has been whittled away at. I don't think we can ever have a really happy outcome without some kind of planning, because in the absence of it, people misuse Act 250 as de facto planning. And they will raise a particular this or that criterion where really their concern is that this thing doesn't belong there. So I think we probably should address planning.
Well, it was, Senator Campion asked earlier about sacred cows. Planning was on my list. Albeit the reality is that there is less than robust planning in the state. Criteria 10, I believe it is, regional and local plans. That's one of my sacred cows. And if we're going to abuse it, we ought to know that we're abusing a regulatory process. Secondly, public input. All right, in terms of opening up review of development within a community to all of the people in the community, albeit the imperfect planning process aside, that has to be preserved going through, and I wouldn't even bring it up. Then the structure of the district commissions with appointments of people from the local geographic areas where the decisions are being made. And then, and this actually isn't a sacred cow because this would be a change, appeals should be returned to the Natural Resources Board. And
Can you remind us, if you don't mind, Representative,
It-
those of us who don't, right now, they,
goes to the Environmental Division of the Superior Court, and it
Okay.
goes de novo, and it starts all over. And anyhow, that can't be a sacred cow because it doesn't
no, I
exist.
understand, but yeah.
But
Comment about the appeals, which I think that's great. One thing with the rules of fair process that we're trying to add into this discussion is the idea of voice and feeling heard and access as a citizen as well as part of that process. But I've heard when I went to an event at the Vermont Law School for Act 250, I was in the process and appeals section breakout group, and almost everyone there said that they could not find the correct information, did not have access, and felt excluded from this process because they didn't have financial means and so forth. If that was something to add into this, would that be another layer you'd like to see? Do they feel like they have a voice in this process as community members, or is it just solely the upper level that we're looking for?
So I was the chair of Appeals and Process Subcommittee, and we came to the conclusion that that was probably only valuable for people who participated. It's not something the public has thoughts about or can really conceive. So, at least in our thinking, it was probably better suited for this deeper survey that people could fill out if they wanted it, and sort of, if you check yes here, answer the next 5 questions kind of thing. I think that was, it's just so technical that it gets hard to hope that you could engage with a broad swath.
So can we stay with the idea of planning?
Yeah.
And we get a little more funding
Yeah.
about it. It's a sacred cow, which to me means it's a big decision for you to either choose to offer it up somehow for input or not.
right, and maybe I wasn't articulate, but in terms of your description of the planning process, which is accurate, I wouldn't want the discussion to get around to, we don't need criteria 10, what the hell, those plans aren't worth the paper they're written on, kind of discussion, when in fact, we should be holding out a standard that there should be good, reasonable discussion at the community level prior to an application coming in, and that reasonable discussion should be at the local level, et cetera. So I'm just looking to prevent, oh, well, it's just trashy, it's not working anyhow. Well, it is working in certain areas better
Some
than
areas,
others.
yes.
But I do think that the conversation around these public trust resources that should be protected, and what does good planning look like at the local level? If that's something that could happen as a conversation piece, because I think we have regional planning, we have local planning. Right now, we don't have a lot of official statewide planning, although there are a number of statewide plans that inform review and inform decisions, and it's very uncoordinated, but it exists. So there's this transportation plan, there's an energy plan, there's big plans out there.
And as passed, Act 200 required coordination between local, regional, and state plans, and that was one of the erosion factors that took less than 2 years to make that disappear.
Well, I was going to say, the citing of new energy project, renewable projects have given regional and local planning a shot in the arm. I mean, in my town of Newark, which does not have zoning, does not have any town plan, they got very excited about the fact that they might be seeing turbines on their ridge lines, and consequently came together, which was rather unusual because it's a very dispersed community with no town hall, no stores, no post office. So I really think planning has got a shot in the arm lately as a result of the controversy over, especially the big windmills.
And a lot of our, to the extent we have planning, we struggle with municipal lines, regional lines, I think. So I do like the idea of figuring out how to tease it out. One of the ways I think about it is if we concluded that planning, maybe we want to have a strategy around planning, we ought to not surprise the people. Like if our report does that, says that in November, and everyone from the August meeting goes, what the hell is this?
Yeah, right.
You know, that would be a problem. So I think it is worth teasing it out. I mean, I guess sounds like we kind of agree, without concluding anything, but
Planning and climate change have come up as.
So we spoke this, there are two levels. This first level of dialogue is this high level, and it really is a vision for this statewide plan in words and conversation for you to consider. And then there's a second conversation that is around local planning, and that will draw out this idea of where we touch it. I think local conversation will be about infrastructure and competing demands, and it gets a little closer. I still want to see if that's taken us towards a legislative track that will look like it was connected to those forums.
Can you just say that one more time?
Which piece?
Oh, just the whole thing.
The whole thing.
Just planning, you're gonna have the high level conversation and then those
so it's these big buckets, right? We recognize that it's the spirit of Act 250, which is our first cut at this, which we think is important stuff. How do we balance this at a statewide level so Vermont doesn't become the place where people come from to get away from? That, I think, gets you information about what could be, if you choose to pick it up that way, a statewide plan. There's certainly a voice of Vermont saying these things are important to us. And we've got narrative that will filter and will discuss them in agriculture. Then there's a secondary level of conversation potentially that brings it down. You mentioned scenario planning before. Maybe it's closer to a scenario plan. What does this look like locally? What that could open up, the way I've been looking at and researching and trying to understand this, is I think there appears to be misunderstanding about what Act 250 does and doesn't cover. It gets attached to some decisions that aren't about Act 250. If you are open to considering an expansion of the jurisdiction, I think there's some clarity that could happen there. I think there's enough overlap and enough information that I've read and understood that there are ways around it currently, and it doesn't jive wholly with other local planning or permitting jurisdictions. So I think that's where the criteria seem solid. Like the criteria, when you filter them through for Act 250, seem solid in a way to test whether this meets the criteria. It's that jurisdiction piece locally that I think is confusing on one board. We dived into it.
Well, whether it's confusing or not, I think it's part of where the rubber hits the road in our process. And just popped in my mind that the criteria are kind of more of the education in the slideshow. These are 10 things that are already in Act 250.
Yeah.
Someone had their hand up, but I guess
I did actually.
Oh, Aaron.
I just wanted to note, legal point on plans. The more specific, today, under the law, the more specific the plans are, the local regional plans, the more effective they are. And my observation as a lawyer dealing with Act 250 and as a former local planner, that pushes a debate at the local level about what is your philosophy in the locality about the plan? Is it a vision or is it a regulatory document? And I don't know if that is helpful or not, but I wanted to make sure you're aware of that perspective.
So, trying to weld together some of the ideas. I think, Paul, you're onto something with this two-level thing. And maybe it was Paula mentioned the scenarios. Cassie, I actually, the more I think about it, I think that is essential because otherwise we're just having an esoteric conversation, philosophical conversation about our state. But so I don't know. We'll think of better examples. But somebody wants to develop 120 units. Now categorize your whatever values. Like, because I think that somebody will say, that's great, that'll help our schools, and somebody will say, yeah, but you can't have it spread all over, you know, the remaining rural section of our town. And so I like that. I think that encourages just a frame that helps people be forced to make these choices. You know, otherwise it's like, yeah, I just want it all to be open so that it looks pretty for my bike ride, right? That doesn't get us a lot. Nobody would disagree in a sense.
So my quote from your comments there, and I think it fits, is so we've got this idea of Vermont state. It gets at this local plan, it gets at this local personality. So the conversation, I think fundamentally will be different in an urban area than it will be in a much more rural area. And I think that's good input for you.
Right.
Well, and that comes by virtue of where we're talking.
Yes.
I think the impact in, you know, Lyndonville, the discussion will be different than the one in Burlington.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Diane?
I was just gonna say a great scenario to compare and discuss levels of values would be affordable housing. It's something everybody says we need and want and we'll need more. And then you get to where will it be and what are the impacts? You know, how do people decide this is something I want as a good member of society, but I don't want it near me? Right? You know.
Sure.
Just going back to what Senator Pearson was talking about, I'm wondering, and I apologize, I think this is maybe directed at David Dean, for my ignorance on this. Right now, Act 250 in Burlington, same process as Lyndonville, same kinds of considerations.
But we have local zoning, so,
Okay.
right? So it's, I don't know.
Depends on what's in place in the rural area, but potentially, yeah, I mean, you.
Well, the criteria are the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The information that comes in under criteria 10 could be very different. Non-existent in some rural areas and well developed in urban centers.
And that could drive
So I guess I'll just have to go back to and look at that a little bit. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Just
but
say
yeah.
that could drive jurisdiction also. If you've got planning and zoning or not, the jurisdictional thresholds are different.
Right. So I guess what I'm getting at is there are going to be, again, as I think you all know, there are going to be communities. Craftsbury is one that I would think of that wouldn't want, that has really, in some ways, up in the Northeast Kingdom, this sort of special community that they wouldn't want to necessarily, I mean, I guess every community is going to have their own sort of priorities, and I can see Burlington, in a way, just having different needs, and that's just different expectation.
Well, and that's just the planning, but
Yeah,
if you go
right.
into the criteria 8 area, deer, you're not gonna have a lot of deer yards in Burlington.
Right.
You're probably not gonna have a lot of prime ag soils
Yeah.
in Burlington.
Actually,
Right.
yes.
But
Right.
I'd see more of these like municipal services, education,
Yeah.
those would be more prominent
Yeah.
versus like archaeology.
yeah, all I'm responding to is, are they same criteria,
Yeah.
same words, different response?
Yeah.
But that's valuable.
Yeah,
That's what
that
we
is.
want to see, right?
Right.
Yes and no. I mean, I actually wrote the open space protection plan for Burlington, and we inventoried all these same resources, and they're very important to Burlington and growing awareness of integrating the natural systems with human habitat. So it's not that different. It's a different ratio of developed land to open space. But we mapped prime ag land so that people could start growing food in Burlington, and we mapped open green belts so that we could use it for stormwater. I mean, you need ecosystem function no matter what scale of the human impact is. And that's where we're heading with all this.
And Norton could not have hired you to do that same analysis. That's the point I'm making.
I don't know.
Norton, Vermont.
Antivirus.
Norton, Vermont. It's a
Oh,
town.
right,
It's a
yeah.
very
Oh, yeah.
community.
I learn a new town every time I'm in this building.
So, Paul,
It's my district.
to
No,
your,
not the elephant.
Important elephant.
Right.
one, Paul, I don't know if this is helpful, but one of the questions that nags at me that I think has consistently come up around Act 250 discussions is if you're developing 9, what is it, subdivisions, you're exempt?
9 lots.
9 lots.
Yep.
And but we've never handled the fact that when you're the 90th along a stretch of road, you're still exempt. And
Yes.
this might be a scenario that
Yes.
helps tease out the planning question.
Yes.
Because that is frankly been what some people would consider a flaw. It sort of meant that the 90th has come slowly,
Right.
but it's
Just wait
still
for the
there.
wait period
And we,
Yeah.
when we talked about it initially, the idea was to not have 90. But anyway, it just is something people can get their hands around.
Yes.
Well, I'll speak for me. I don't have a clue how we deal with that, but it's not nothing. And that might help people wrestle with it. That's a hard question, but
Yeah. and so
their
it's-
values, you don't want to, anyway.
So it is,
It's incremental sub-jurisdictional development,
It's-
and it's
jurisdiction
one of
is
our
big.
biggest challenges, is
Yeah.
that incremental sub-jurisdictional.
Yeah, as part of the water subcommittees, even though we dealt with water, that was one of the things we brought up.
I mean, so the
Non-jurisdictional development.
list of map ideas I sent you, I mean, part of the idea was to get to people understanding the vast majority of the development that's happening is not reviewed under Act 250. And a lot of it is this one at a time that Chris is talking about, that is one of our biggest challenges. I think we were also gonna go through the background information, so I just wanna make sure we
Now
leave
that
time
this is
for that.
crystal clear.
Well, I still have a couple other parts of the forum.
Okay.
I wanted to walk us through.
Good.
Let's assume that we work this out. Nope. So, however this lands, facilitators who have been trained again just before the forum, there's a recording sheet, so if we gather priorities, there's a check sheet, and that gets put into an envelope back with the cards, gets returned to the facilitator. We have a person who's usually at a computer, loading in all of the table results in real time, so that before people walk out that night, they know what the consensus was for their forum. And that's been very, very important to people to really see what the result is. We have 2 other things that we wanted to run by you. One is the rules of fair process, and I'm thinking, Paul, if you want to flip through those slides, these are copies of the slides that we made for you to make notes on. If you wanted to give them back to us, that's fine. Again, everything is just a draft. And this for you. So, obviously, we're gonna change a few things here. So we can look.
So we start with our welcome and introductions. Next is our purpose of the forums, which goes all 6.
That's extra.
If you would like to make a call, please hit.
We thought it would be important to show everybody how many forums there are, where are they, and the purpose of the forums. So put that up there.
Let's see,
And the next
the
slide.
next piece here was this video.
That's it, that's on the
Yeah. So before the Act 250 essentials begin, it was brought to our attention that there may be a video or brief little summary that the Natural Resources Board would be willing to provide. It's just another layer, unless the commissioner or members in the room would like to speak on this, but they can give a brief overview. And then we'll jump into Act 250 essentials, which kind of further this with background, key facts, and the process.
What would the Natural Resource Board video be, and does that exist now?
What's that?
What would the video from the Natural Resources Board be?
No, let me rephrase that if I may. We, in conversations with COPE, we're just trying to say, first of all, we want to be a resource for them, for you, and work with Aaron in terms of saying this is correct or this isn't correct when anything is being created to describe what Act 250 is or isn't. and that perhaps there would be a role for us as the NRB to welcome or say hello or whatever would be appropriate from the commission's perspective as the ongoing day-to-day operators, if you will, of Act 250. And you may decide that that's not necessary, but I just think it's helpful for people to understand it's not an abstract concept. It is something that's ongoing, and there's a difference between thinking about what it will be and what it is now. But
So you didn't say video, but you.
the idea is, how would we do it? And it could be a video. Does that mean? It could
play.
be. It could be a theater, right?
If there was a short, like 3, well,
2 minutes.
Yeah.
1 minute.
Yeah, no.
three, you know, that.
Be a mime.
It's a micro.
Can you do it in 3 minutes? Chair Snelling?
I can do a lot of things.
Yeah, but I mean, what's nice about it again is it gets the whole audience to
Yeah,
focus.
yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
And-
sounds-wise.
It would be, graphically, it would be more interesting.
Sure.
I just want to note that the Natural Resources Board has two sheets that it hands out that describe Act 250. They're 2-pagers each. Those could be the basis of, you may even want to make them shorter, but those could be the basis of your Act 250 essentials, because they're just neutrally presented statements about what Act 250 covers, what the criteria are, who the district commissions are, how they're organized, whatever it is that you want to convey. But I think that the NRB already basically has the material. It's just a question of organizing it.
We do have the pamphlet that they provided to us, I believe very similar.
You're talking about the
2
brochure.
sheets, the brochure, but I believe
That's
also-
not the 2 sheets.
There's 2 sheets as well.
Yeah, you need to get those.
We can use those as well, and even having material on site to hand out to people and put on our.
Well, those have been around since
The dark
I worked for the program, which was 1988 to 1996. But they have been, yeah, I'm
They've been
getting there. But they've always been helpful and accurate. And it's just been, they're totally neutral.
Yeah.
Well, let's get them.
Okay, good. Shall
Sure.
I send them to them, or do you want Diane to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was
Aaron,
hoping they'd
please.
already be in here. I was thinking we were gonna go through the presentation. So I guess I'm gonna be a little bit, I wanna know kind of who's doing what and how it fits in with the agenda. So we are at Act 250 Essentials, and so you're saying it's gonna be a PowerPoint. Sounds like it's gonna be based on these two pagers, 4 pages.
So we're gonna add slides here.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that the commissioner host will be going through that. Is that amenable to commission members?
Why wouldn't it be a packaged thing? Like, as you were saying before, a video. I mean,
Well, I thought it was gonna be that, but I also
Yeah.
feel like it's 10 days from now.
Yeah.
Well, they're saying
And
you could.
I,
I'd rather have it be a video so that we know it's
It's the same
consistent.
thing as
We
this.
don't have to worry about your schedule, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, they were talking about 2 different
yeah, we're
things
talking about 2
here.
different
So
things here.
There's an introduction to the NRB or from the NRB or something like that, some NRB thing, and then there's Act 250 Essentials, I think, which is described as being presented by a commissioner.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yours is a welcome, I got that. This is 10 criteria, here they are. This, it's been around for 50 years. There's this many volumes of cases that have been determined. And
Why wouldn't it be the same thing? Why wouldn't she say welcome?
Facts. You mean, I mean,
here's
it
what
could
the
be.
history
It can be
is.
the same thing, and we can script that. I think the idea is if one of you is present, to then weave it into what your process is. That gets at managing those expectations as well, and how you're going to use that data.
So maybe that's A and B on your draft agenda, or, video. C goes to the commissioner host.
That would be great.
But then the
And
commission,
then-
I'm sorry, may I interrupt before you go? So the commissioner that's hosting will go over the process overview that's about to take place? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Okay.
More process of Act 250.
Oh, more process
Right.
of Act
I'm gonna
250.
handle what
And we
is
will just
happening.
discuss
Okay.
at the top.
Thank you for clarifying this.
Only
That-
because,
yeah.
again, back for the consistency part,
That doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. Okay,
I
think that
just
was-
think, yeah, I guess
Well-
we could each do it,
What about,
but I might not be as influent with it as others, or,
Can I jump in? So the idea, we thought there was already an existing 2-minute video. We didn't
No.
expect that you were gonna
Okay.
just produce it, so I think we just have to be realistic since
Yeah.
that's in 10 days. But the idea is we would have probably 3 slides up here that would have the essentials that the public needs to know. And that may
and
be
that's where we
very,
would point and
yes.
say, hey, we're
And
on
you'll
this
have it
commission.
on note.
Got it,
You'll have
okay.
notes, and everybody will say the same thing, because
Got
while you may customize your commentary to your
I understand,
citizens,
right,
we want it to be very consistent, and to be honest, I don't really want people going off script from a timing point of view.
yeah,
I also think that we're gonna boil it down to get them into discussion faster. So this is not 20 minutes up here describing Act 250. So it would be quick, these are the things you need to know, and then Paul will go into, here's how the evening is gonna flow. So that's sort of the bridge from why are you here, thank you for coming, just to refocus you on some details. You've gotten the handouts, here's the brochure, the process is here, these are the most important things we want you to know, and let's get to it. So that's kind of where we are. So maybe 20 minutes from there to kick off.
and just so I'm clear, we're not talking about a video anymore.
Well, I'm not planning to be at each and every.
Right, so
Okay.
how we,
But Donna has said she will try, you will.
Oh, I will.
You will,
Will be at-
she will be at every. So, let's, continue the conversation about exactly how we craft that, if that's okay.
Yeah, we can work with you.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
but you'll be in Bennington County.
Of course. Manchester, I thought it was Manchester.
County.
Oh, yeah.
And that may be one slide. Right, we're not talking 10 slides for
Yeah,
each
yeah,
of
no.
these, right? Very compact.
what,
Do you like read?
we had conceived of this as being also available to people outside of the 6 forums. I just want to make sure we're being mindful of that this has to be portable in a sense. And if people are, where we won't be, or,
So one thing that's great, if you have local stations that can tape it and put it on public access, I highly recommend that, so that anybody, just like you do, city town hall meetings, anybody
And
can
just,
access.
is that our responsibility to let our local,
It's a great question.
I know at one point, it came up the last meeting when I was on the phone, and it sounded like ideally it wouldn't be, it would be, for consistency purposes, you guys would reach out to all the press and the local cable access. I think, yeah, you were on the phone then, Paul. Would that be still okay, or to come from all of you?
Yep.
And I guess I'm thinking that one of the things that you said you would do is this is a meeting in a box.
Yes.
And so the meeting in the box could be built off
Thank you.
the first forum,
Correct.
if it goes well, maybe the second. Then that gets videoed,
Yes.
and that be the foundation for the meeting, if regional planning commissions wanna host
Yes.
one of these.
Yes.
But I have to ask you, how does that work with your big deal? If we wanted regional commissions to be able to facilitate a meeting separate, does that work?
So what I did with economic development was we sent them a packet. I did the training over Skype, and they had the cards and they ran it.
Great,
So
and that worked though.
it did.
That's
It's good. Again, they have to just follow the script.
So that's definitely what we want done. And it kind of gets back to one other summary kind of that I want to be sure you're aware of on public input avenues. Forums, we've agreed they're going to be relatively high level. The survey lets us go deeper with the public. We have a number of professional groups devoting time to this. They will be giving us input as well.
Right.
So the Planners Association kicked it off. Bar Association had a big meeting last week on a lot of it devoted to this. We're going to get a paper from them. And I'm not expecting you to summarize those. I'm just wanting you to understand this commission will be getting input from multiple avenues. There are others. And then lastly, or maybe firstly, we've gotten presentations from all of our advisors, and I'm asking them to provide a 2-page summary of their perspective on our process and where they want it to go. All of those things will be part of informing where we go.
Yeah.
We also have a link on the website for Act 250 comments that Mike helped me set up. So that's connected to my email, so I'll be compiling all of those and putting them in a
Great.
folder on the website. We do have social media live. We're just going to be posting. I sent you all some ideas for posts that we'll be having. What's nice about Facebook is you can put them all in today and then set timers for when they'll go off and be submitted to the public. So no one will be able to post on our pages or your pages, but you can still add as much content as you'd like. So that will be another avenue if someone wants to look on that, which we'll include in the presentation at each forum.
And we add that through you.
Yes.
Right.
That'll be me.
Does the commission has its own Facebook page or no?
Yes.
It does.
So I created one for the
Email.
commission and a Twitter page as well.
Oh, great.
Okay, let's get back into the details.
Okay, so next, we explain how the big deal will work. We ask the facilitators at each table to stand. They'll each have a packet. They will have been through training before. The table group starts by introducing themselves to each other. We try, when people come into the room and take a seat, we try to ask spouses not to sit together, to really mix and mingle with their neighbors and mix up the conversation. We find that, especially in some counties, if spouses are together, one spouse has a tendency to let the other spouse, the more dominant spouse, talk for them. And so if we can ask people to divvy up, we get more voices heard. So we show them how this is going to work, and we explain what the situation will be and show them what the cards might look like. And obviously, the whole 4 packs of decks, that's all going to change. So move along. We show them what some sample cards look like. That will change. And then this is a slide that stays up while they're going through that. So that discussion group and the note-taking, the conversations, the questions. And then we get to, I think the next is the rules of fair process. So in looking at any procedure or policies, we use the rules of fair process. And what we thought we would do is take them through rule by rule and ask them, based on what they've learned tonight about Act 250, could they answer these 6 questions? So we go one more. And so we put those up and we'll leave that up. And you can see what your reaction is to that. Erin, have you used these before?
No.
Oh, okay. So
These
this
are
is in,
questions that are being asked?
Yep, so these are procedural justice questions. So when you're looking at any procedure literally, and you want to test it for or measure it against the fairness of the process or procedure, these are generally the rules that we use.
So you're asking, but they're in question format, so you're asking them of whom and what how are people responding?
At the table of 8 to 10 people,
Yes.
they'd open the discussion with the facilitator and ask openly to the group to.
Do citizens have a
So-
chance to express? So afterward,
Right, so from what we've talked about, however this ends up with the first level, second level, from everything you've learned tonight about Act 250, from everything
Okay.
you've heard in your discussion at this table tonight, let's take these one by one. Do you feel that citizens have a chance to express their
Okay.
opinions
Okay.
about Act 250 or during the process?
Can I just clarify, are we talking about the process being the meeting or
No.
the Act 250?
Act 250 process.
Okay.
So when you're talking about using the time, how much, this seems really detailed, and how much time goes into each of these? They're gonna do the big deal cards, and then you're gonna do this?
So we have about an hour and 15 minutes out of a 2-hour block for the whole group discussion. So depending, now that we're not prioritizing 4 packs of cards, and to be honest, I don't know how that's going to end up until we re-meet. It seems like that will take less time now, but I had...
This seems like a place we're not going to go necessarily from today's conversation.
This being what, this?
Yes.
This is very helpful for us as a commission to frame our review of Act 250, but I don't know about the public. I people feel differently, but I look at that and I think
It's a lot to jump
it's a lot of
into.
detail, and it's what we should be looking at, so I
Right.
appreciate that.
So I think we're settling on that two-piece of dialogue, that vision, state vision piece, and then a local scenario piece.
Would this be something in the survey you'd like to see?
That's it.
Possibly,
Yeah.
yeah, more survey level.
Yes.
Yeah, right, it's
Especially if they've worked with it before, they'll know,
Yeah.
they have their voice.
Right.
So when I do this with students, it takes them about 10 minutes, just so you know, because it's
Okay.
mostly yes, no. So they've already had a lot of discussion, and so, you know, my idea was, once we got all of this worked out, we at COPE were gonna run through this as, with some guests that we invite in, and we literally time it and run through it and practice it.
But take number 6, for example, you're basically saying, is Act 250 based on accurate information? Well, what information? You know, I mean,
Yeah, we haven't gone.
so that's,
We wouldn't
yeah,
have gone that
okay, I see, all right,
the way we're talking about now.
okay.
So yes, some of this can migrate to survey, that makes a lot of sense.
And I would also say that in a different type of conversation, some of these words would have different meanings, but like, can citizens request an appeal? That's all of a sudden, wow, appealing an Act 250 decision, and that's sort of the stuff we got it, that's too much.
Yeah.
But Aaron just suggested a question, can you just
Well,
repeat it?
I'm more, not necessarily suggesting a question, but it seems like with these questions would draw out potentially for you, or some other version of these questions, is do citizens feel like they have access to the process? And do they feel like they should? And I wanted to at least,
Yeah.
that is part of your charge, is looking at participation and appeals. And so finding a way to get that information might be helpful.
So our prior iteration of this was that high-level stuff, and then these cars, one of them was about access, one was about jurisdiction. Iteration of this was that high-level stuff, and then these cars, one of them was about access, one was about jurisdiction, because they all seemed important. They are somewhat more important if you have understand it, and that you can connect to it.
Right. So
that's the challenge.
The outline I sent you kind of had that. So it was like saying, you know, before you get into one level of conversation, you need somebody to provide background information
Yes.
to inform the conversation. You know, what does it mean? Climate change. What does it mean? Why do we care about it? Or these other kind of higher level conversations need background information to have the informed conversation.
So what I'm hearing, I think, is take this out of the forums, consider this in a survey, and then the commission may consider these later. Is that what I'm hearing?
Maybe revise them.
Yeah, parts of it is, I mean, it's sort of how do people feel about Act 250 in a sense, right, in terms of their own access, as you said.
Right, we're not going to use those, what is the other way of receiving some feedback?
Well,
So this was the feedback piece on what you thought about Act 250 based on everything you've learned, right?
The
So,
fairness.
so if we pull that, so then what would come next, or what would replace that?
I see scenarios being one piece that maybe we wanted to add in. If it would be great if they understand what is going on with Act 250 across the state, and then they get an idea of 100 units, what does that look like? That might be a great piece to see how they can actually connect. Or maybe it's through a video from then, or
Because you understand what I'm saying, right? Because this
Yes.
was going to be a way of us getting some conclusions, some final thoughts, and if we were going to put that in a survey, how would we do that during this process? We're replacing it.
I think the scenario could be one piece as
Okay.
to seeing what that looks like for each individual, and then discussing, as I see it now, and I've added in all my input, is this seen as a fair process if you want to ask that question, or is this just another, or is this piece of legislation that I feel like impacts me personally? There could be pieces like that, or it could just be over this discussion for the past 2 hours, how do you relate to Act 250, or where do you see it going in the future? That could be
Those last two intrigued
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, more than the other,
I
yeah.
think
What
like I
changes?
said,
What do you think
internally,
is that?
we're gonna look at these, we are looking at those rules. Yeah, where do they want it to go in the future? I mean, we're
Yeah.
looking for a reality check from the public on the subjects that we're thinking about in our conversations, right? So those are climate change and renewable energy development and critical statewide resources. That's what we're really, we want to walk away from this with the public saying yes or no, or here's how, you know, like we want, those are the things we need feedback on.
I like the idea of the scenarios fitting in with the decks
Yes.
of, you know, okay, you just categorized, you know, landscape and open space prioritization, but now how do you handle it when this scenario shows up? So I don't know if that.
Well, and there's a little bit of education prompting that one,
Yeah.
about how that works locally and what those exemptions are.
Yeah, but it doesn't. It also doesn't need to be based in the nitty gritty of reality. It's about like kind of what do you want, or what would you like to see the reality be. So I mean, I don't. But it is complex, and but it also. I don't think we need to be too bogged down to make it valuable.
Yeah.
Are there typical scenarios that you deal with, like you have the 120 units of affordable housing that Diane
There are other
mentioned?
people that would be better to answer that question.
What was your question, Paul?
Are there 2 or 3 typical scenarios that?
Nothing's typical.
I guess
But I mean-
I need someone to explain this to me, because I'm not sure how this is gonna get us input on what's important about the future of 250.
Well, if people are ranking their values and some of the, basically, I think the deck that we're now contemplating is higher level, right? And so I might put climate change mitigation and water quality high on the list, and higher than concern about school infrastructure. But then, if I'm presented with, you know, that might be my ranking for industrial site, but then if it's affordable housing, well, maybe I'm going to think about it differently, right? So, in other words, the scenarios take it out of the totally abstract and pin it down to how does this work? Isn't that, I don't know, maybe I'm imagining it too simply,
I
but.
can give you an idea how we use scenarios in healthcare planning. You give a scenario, a statement, let's say, I'll take Paul's example this week, 2 parents take a child to the emergency room for a sudden problem, and, you know, what would you do, what would you want to have happen, and the public discusses that and they have a plan, and then the disruptor in that case was, and now they don't have health insurance. How does that change what you just decided? What is that, how does that change what you just said you would do as your plan? So that's the simplest way to do scenarios, is you change up one factor in a significant way. So they're not having to change a whole scenario, but then you can do multiple examples of that. 2 or 3 is usually the limit.
One thing I have to quickly add, I agree or I understand that you're seeing where does this look for the next 50 years. Potentially these examples could be at a local level, at a regional level, at a state level. That might be the best way to see how do you focus in off my county, or if it's just Chittenden County or just Burlington, what is my viewpoint? And then what is it when it's the whole region, and what is it when I have to look at something statewide? We're looking at affordable housing across the state or whatever it may be. Would that give additional information to you?
Yeah, I like the different scales, or but Dale has a thought.
Well, I actually was going to ask a question of the people who've done this before. In terms of the output that you get from this and how it gets used by the clients, I'm thinking there's 2 different things. There's the ranking itself, which is one set of information, but then there's the notes. And I wonder, like, how do your clients make use of the notes that the note taker is taking? Because that might be where more of the meat is.
Right. So, so the notes come in a couple different forms. One is the raw notes, and then the other is we look for themes across all groups. So we look for them. We might say the sentiment in Springfield is this, and the sentiment in Randolph is that. we might find that across the state there's a lot of similarity in themes or some regional differences. So that's part of what we try to do when we analyze that conversation. It's not hard data, it's conversation, so you have to accept it that way. It's not scientific, it's not statistically analyzed. The rankings are more telling in many ways. So to see that a whole community, and I'll use South Burlington as an example, we had 250 people at a forum, and 95% of the people there had the same things ranked the same way. That gave their council a lot of information because they had thought that the public was very divided on an issue. And then they found out the public really wasn't divided at all. That there were some outspoken voices and outliers, but for the most part, the whole community did feel a certain way. So that's how we take you through it. And that helps.
Thank you. Yeah. So I guess I'm getting it a little more, but I also think that in like Chris's description, it made me think that, well, I don't necessarily see it that way. Like if a resource is worth protecting, it should be protected. And it doesn't matter whether you're proposing an industrial park or affordable housing. If it's an important wetland, it needs to be protected. And so I don't.
So your ranking will be
Well,
consistent.
yeah. Maybe that's a flip on the scenario. I think I'm in tune with you, and I like this idea, probably because between the two of us we've talked about it a few times, so I've heard it several times. Here's the vision. Here's some way of making it locally impactful. The scenario could be around a housing issue, and we know that there's a history of developers sort of understanding the limitations and then maybe dropping so many units that don't quite hit that Act 250 threshold, waiting a period of time and another. So before you know it, you have, over a period of years, a much bigger development. I'm not saying that's nefarious, it's simply a way that we can see housing development spread. A flip side could be a wetland. If the scenario is a wetland and you have a need for housing, then how do you protect that locally? I mean, the idea of the local scenario pushes you to have conversation about making a forced choice or understanding how it balances. That's good information for you.
It's just on the natural resource piece, it's important to remember that there's a number of other environmental regulations that apply to development. So for instance,
Yes.
most wetlands are going to be protected outside the Act
Understand
250
that.
process, so that's not really a question that's in play.
Yeah.
Well,
I was using that as the low-ball
Sure.
example because that it's not in play. And I think that what I'm looking for are what are the other resources that need to not be in play. We've agreed that wetlands should be out.
And, most of the wildlife habitat resources are not addressed otherwise than through Act 250, so that's certainly an area where Act 250 is a primary protectorate of that resource.
And that gets back to the education around public trust resources.
Yeah.
So water,
Yeah.
wildlife, and
Yeah.
air.
Yeah.
And like that, where is the, how do we protect those?
So what
And also, if I may, sorry to interrupt, Paul, but some of this information that Billy just shared, also, that seems to me that should come out early on in these conversations with people saying, hey, there are, keeping in mind, you may have your priorities, but there are other laws on the books that are going to be protecting certain things. So people, again, have a good idea of what Act 250 does and doesn't do and some of the other factors involved.
Well, and that gets back to sacred cows and the notion of public input. It doesn't matter whether or not the agency issues a permit. If the development is wrong for the community ethos, whatever that is, then there has to be that kind of participation that, fine, you got your permit, but this is wrong for this community at this place. And it could be the result of your survey, or whatever, that it's a critical piece of land that needs to be protected, despite having an agency permit. And the only place that can happen where the community can make that statement is Act 250. Because agency permits are science-driven, and that's their job, and that's the way it's done. But The only place that the community really gets a chance to weigh in is in the 250 process, and that's why I held it up as a sacred cow.
Act 250 really looks at the whole, and that's where the opportunity for that larger conversation can happen.
So Paula and then John.
I have several things. One is, there was a concern about open mic and how are we gonna handle that, so I wanted to mention that each table will have index cards and the group will be asked if they could come up with one key question that they want answered tonight. And then everybody else will have a chance to drop their question into a box, so if they have similar questions, the table might say, okay, this is the one we want asked. We're hoping that the commissioner will be comfortable answering those a few questions at the end of the evening that come from each table. I suspect there'll be duplicates, so everything else will go on to a FAQ sheet, and that'll be posted on the websites. Roaming, I'm hoping that the roamers that night, now, you know, Donna will be there, the commissioner, and I will be roaming, and that way if any table has a question, they put their hand up, and I'm usually the first one there, but depending on what the question is, I'm hoping that you would be resources during the forum. And then the commissioner would close out the evening. So to thank everybody for their participation, we'll have it up on a slide what the website is. We'll remind them that there's Redbox for one thing and question, you know, we'll have all that planned and scripted out for you so that you can close out the evening and tell them what the next steps are and how the commission will be using their input. I just wanted to get us all the way through the forum. And then the other thing I wanted to say.
5 minutes to 12, good job. It's just basically a forum.
Yeah, so, you know, we obviously are gonna be working on this new deck of cards. We will get it to you. If you see it in email, it's not gonna look like this, obviously, because what happens is they get printed, two up with 2 cards this way, and then the other side is, you know, like that. So I'll explain that, but I do need you to look those over. I wished that you had had time to try this, but I'm wondering if any of these cards are usable.
I'd like to see
Because I would love to know what you want for the content. That's what takes us the longest to put together. So if there's anything from here that even if it can be reworded and used,
but I'm wondering, like, you're mixing them all up, it'd be nice to know the way you'd have them bundled, I think.
So each
well,
color
values, I think.
So all water and air is blue here. So we have, just to read them off, so water pollution, streams, wetlands, sufficiency of water supply, impact on existing water supply, shorelines, air pollution, and so forth. These purple ones here are more municipal pieces, services, education, and that's economic. We have green, which is natural, so endangered species, aesthetics, archaeology, historic sites. And our last grouping is growth, so primary agricultural soils, productive forest soils, earth resources, extraction of earth resources, energy conservation, pretty much the whole list that was provided to us, public investments, settlement patterns, and so forth. So it appears that these overarching topics are kind of that higher level that you're looking for, but potentially these could be beneath them on slides as content to provide.
Here, John, are you finished? John wanted to
Yes.
ask a question.
Well, it's a subject that I don't think has been touched upon directly. Act 250, agency permits, ministering agency permits provide a presumption of compliance under a number of the criteria and sub-criteria. In Act 250, the process in many instances provides a first-time opportunity for the public or the commission, with the help of an expert, to challenge those agency presumptions of compliance, the presumptions of compliance those agency permits create. And it's a first-time opportunity for those permits to be challenged in a quasi-judicial forum. Many of the agency natural resource permits are issued without any quasi-judicial process, and this is a first-time opportunity for the interested public to participate at that level and to get that level of quality information on, you know, particular subject matter or permit. That's going to be the presumption that the agency permits provide, and the ability to challenge those permits in this Act 250 form will, I guarantee you, be the most discussed subject matter in all your hearings. This is where the rubber meets the road in terms of the tension between, developers, the development community, and the people who might want to protect against some type of development. The developers see that process as dragging things out, as being, you'll hear the term redundant process, etc. And just want to put that on your radar, that to be prepared for substantive discussion in that regard.
Yes?
Try to get it through in 30 seconds. I love the term bias suppression. And I think you have the bias right out of the box when you said we have to balance someone's wanting to protect their scenic view and economic development, and describing balance between environmental protection and economic development as the spirit of Act 250. I'm more than a semi-informed citizen. I've spent the last 2 years studying Vermont's environmental movement in the 60s and the 70s.
Well, you wrote the history.
Yeah,
For the Bennington Museum.
Bennington
That's
Museum.
right.
So part of the most consistent group to use the term balance between the environment and development are developers. And if anything, there's been constant retrenchment in protecting our environment since about 74, when the land use plan failed to make it out of the committee in the House. And that old communist, Dean Davis, who had the idea for the state land use plan that came out of the Gift Commission, says that was the biggest disappointment of his career. We now have many more, much more equipment to do what they couldn't do then, to identify those natural resources areas using science, sophisticated mapping, and GIS. So again, if you represent Act 250 as both an environmental protection law and an economic development law, I think that's wrong, and I think it's a bias right out of the chute.
Thank you. Could we get this gentleman's, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Bruce.
Bruce, can we get your email address, maybe get it in the notes?
Yeah.
Just, you've done this history, it might be interesting, you've got a card.
Thank you.
And you even have a photo on your card, so.
All right. We have a lot to do before the 27th. You do. Before the 27th, just to be clear. What is our plan for touching base again and reviewing draft material?
So I already sent the social media post, since there's one piece separate, but you have a chance to look at that. I will revisit and revamp all of these cards and resubmit them to you through an email format, if that's okay, unless you have the printout. We will remake the facilitator worksheet, we'll look at planning and also a script for the whole meeting agenda. The video appears to not be happening for these upcoming forums, potentially, maybe.
Possibly.
Yes, okay, it's not out. We will talk to Diane about that. And then we'll rework this essentials piece and make that scripted.
Why?
Yes. Social media posts, I would love for you all to look at them. Probably today might be too soon, but by Monday would be wonderful. Just give your initial thoughts. The cards, I hope to, when I get back to the office, start working on them, and we'll discuss, and by Monday, hopefully we can have, by the end of day Monday, I'll have a new pack ready. The script, I think we'll all work on together.
If you want to try the cards, print them, cut them. Print them back to back, cut them, and they should be fine.
Does it,
There's lots of people who want to talk right now. Senator Pearson.
well, I'm wondering if we are, I believe, the legislature's meeting Tuesday, so that means we're all here. I've been told for the whole Tuesday afternoon. So, I don't know if Tuesday morning.
Senate or the legislature? Because we often don't come on the same day.
I believe.
No,
full
we're
show,
up here
but-
Tuesday.
Yeah.
We are.
You're here in the morning, and then you're gonna override, and we're gonna come in. That's the plan.
I call.
All right.
A little optimistic, maybe.
So I don't know. So we'll be back together. I also, near you guys in Chittenden County, I'm happy to. I mean, I think we have pretty good first draft, but the final draft we're a little ways away from. So I don't know. I guess I'm trying to volunteer to help. We're going to be here on Tuesday in some iteration, so that's information for you. And then you're leaving on Thursday.
Yeah.
So
Can we meet over lunch on Tuesday?
Yeah.
lunch.
I can be here, let's try and do that.
I mean, and just,
Maybe
you know,
here,
reserve
maybe
the
here.
reserve the room and meet.
Can we reserve this room?
Yeah, the two of
Tuesday
us
at
are
lunch?
okay.
Thank you very much.
So,
Noon.
I guess I also want to reiterate, a couple of the folks are in the room right now, we have really great existing educational resources and maps, and I really want these to be at the meetings. Like, they're on the list I sent you guys. Billy's here about A&R, can make us informational mapping in a large format. There may be others that we need to get on here. I floated some ideas here, and then go back. So I want to make sure that people can access the information, at least some of it that we have available, to help inform the conversation.
Just to be clear, I think we met at the VPA conference about a month ago. I offered to assist. We haven't heard from you guys since. We weren't aware of this meeting. So, I don't think there's been a lot of communication from the commission or the consultants with the advisors. So we're certainly here to help, but we can't help if we're not asked or notified that things are happening. So.
Saying that
I handed to him. All right.
Yeah, or hand it to
Thank you.
him.
Aaron.
Here, give
I
it
just
to
wanted
you.
to flag that the documents that I mentioned that could help you with the essentials, I emailed as we were sitting here, not just to you guys, but also to all the commission members, and a copy to Diane, so you all have them.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Or you all will have them.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So we're meeting Tuesday at noon here.
Tuesday, noon, yeah.
Oh, can I make a request also?
Yeah.
Is it possible to communicate to the advisors the date and location of all the meetings?
It should be on the webpage.
Okay, could you direct me to the document? Because I've just found these spreadsheets that are very complicated to interpret, so.
I'm hoping to get a full layout to Mike probably by today. With
Yeah, I couldn't
details.
find the dates
And the press release ones too. I mean, that-
Yes, press releases, but we don't have all the locations yet. There's
Right,
3 of the
I
locations.
just want to make everybody aware that the days and the towns where things are on the website, on your website, but the specific location is not the venue.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good point. I don't even, yeah.
That needs to get added.
Yeah.
Yes.
As soon as possible.
So I just also want you to know that people have been asking us.
Where will it be?
Yes, and we're just referring them to the commission's website
Okay.
whenever it's possible to get those on there.
We don't have them all confirmed yet.
I know, I'm just saying
Right.
whenever it's possible, Paula, you know,
Yeah.
So this is the committee's website.
Yeah,
On the
the
website.
legislature.
And that, they should also be on our Facebook page.
Yes, once we get those postings, you confirm the language.
Would you send that to me again, that link? I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, same here.
I don't know why I missed
Sorry.
it.
My internet is fine. All right. But I'll go someplace where I know I can really get it all the time. I will catch up, but I haven't seen.
Yeah, Paul, put you in the backyard. See, I'll put you in the backyard.
What a guy.
Paul,
Press release can go up on the website.
I,
I can't, yes,
We need to have Dr. People want to
Bill
see
be
us
over.
stuck on.
definitely.
No.
Mike's is active.
As much as possible, we want to
Sure, that's.
fine.
Yeah.
We need to be transparent.
We have the president and a press release